now, and let we go to the slide where we left in the last lecture, and we have seen the CAPM model, right? And the beta is emerged as a very important parameter in this CAPM model. So the CAPM model is described for any security by using this equation: expected return from security I is equal to RF plus ERM minus RF into beta I, where beta I is the, you can say, parameter for particular security, right? It is the parameter for particular security. ERM is expected return from market, and RF is the risk-free interest rate or risk-free return available in the market. And this value ERM minus ERF is called the risk premium. It is called the market risk premium. That is the extra, you can say, premium that you expect when you are investing in the risky security like the stocks, right? It is applicable to any risky security. So that is ERM minus RF. So it is risk premium, right? How much market provides you a return greater than the risk-free return, and then it is get multiplied by the beta of the particular security and add it with the RF. So it gives you the expected value of your return on security I. So that's why this quantity ERM minus RF is called the market risk premium. Okay, and if you find ERI minus RF, that will be the security risk premium, right? How much you are getting return greater than RF for particular security which is a risky. Okay, so that CAPM model we have understood, and we have derived this CAPM model by using the statistical analysis and the optimization criteria, and it is a straight line equation, right? And we have seen the beta equal to 1 corresponds to the market portfolio, beta greater than 1 corresponds to aggressive, and beta less than 1 corresponds to the defensive security. Okay, so that's what we have seen in the last lecture. And then we come to the discussion of the over and under price security based on this CAPM model, right? So any security whose expected return and beta, if we plot, and it will lie above this CAPM line or SML line, which is also called SML line, then it is the underpriced. And if any security, if lies below this line, it is overpriced, right? And this line corresponds to equilibrium. This line corresponds to equilibrium. Here we are talking about the securities which are part of the market portfolio. Okay. Then we have seen a modeling of the return generating process. So we have now the return from market, and we have a return from individual security which is part of the market. So RIT and RMT. So let we take these two variable. RMT is a return from market in a some time, say T, and RIT is also return from individual security I in some time frame T. Okay, so if I have that data, right, RIT and RMT, so I have market return, and at the same instant of time what I have the return of the security. And if I sketch this, or if I mark these points on a two-dimensional space, I get some random points like this. So this point, this point, this point, this point, like this, right? Now if I regress this linearly, I get a relation RIT equal to alpha I plus beta I into RMT plus some residual error. The residual error is given by epsilon IT. So relation between any individual security which is a part of market and the return of market, you can relate by a straight line or you can linearly regress, but there is some residual error left out, which is unexplained residual error, right? So any security which is a part of market will not move exactly in proportion to the market return, but there is some residual error, and we are assuming some characteristics, some statistical characteristics of this epsilon IT, which is the residual error. And if these assumptions are true, this model will work for most securities. This model will work for most securities. So if you know the market return, and if you model the individual security, you can find alpha and beta, and then later on you can predict if my market moves in this way, then how my security will move, right? So that way this model will work if this epsilon IT satisfies some statistical conditions, and that condition we have seen, it is a zero mean process, means its expected value should be 0. Its variance should be constant. So sigma epsilon I square must be a constant. Then the covariance of this residual error with the market return is to be 0. It is uncorrelated with the market return, right? This epsilon error is totally random term. It is not correlated with any RMT. Also, this epsilon IT and epsilon IS means at any time t and any time s, these errors are also uncorrelated, means as the time moves, then also these errors are totally uncorrelated, random. It will not depend on any error in the past. It is totally a random term. And similarly, this epsilon IT and epsilon JT means for security I and security J. If you take two securities which are part of market, then also the covariance of this error term, residual error term, must be 0. So under this assumption, this model remains valid, and we can divide this now in a two part, RIT equal to alpha I plus beta I RMT plus epsilon IT, where we call this alpha I plus beta I into RMT as a systematic return, and this epsilon IT we can say unsystematic return. We can say it is a random, right? So up to this point, I think we have covered in the last lecture. So I go to that last slide where we were. So yeah, so we were at this. So total return is this systematic return or systematic part plus unsystematic part. Now let me find the expected value of this total return and the variance, means risk, right, of this security. Okay, so let me now do some statistical operation on this, and I am assuming you are knowing the property of the expectation and the variance which you have studied in your probability and statistics. So now I think you are convergent with all these kind of things. So if I take expectation on both sides for my last this, so I take expectation of RIT given RMT. So I know RMT and I am finding the expected value of this RIT given RMT. So that is called conditional expectation. Expected value of RIT given RMT is equal to, if I apply the expectation vector or expectation operator on both these sides, then it becomes expectation of alpha I given RMT. But alpha I is a constant, so expectation of constant is a constant. So it is alpha I. I think you know the property of expectation. Then plus beta I is a constant, you can take outside the expectation vector, into expectation of RMT given RMT. So that is RMT, right? And then the expectation of this epsilon IT given RMT is always 0, right? So I have the expected return of security equal to alpha I plus beta I RMT. So on an average, it follows this straight line equation, alpha I plus beta I RMT. That's what we say, we want to say. So if we know the RMT, we can find the expected return of the any individual security which is part of the market using this model. Similarly, if I use the variance operator, then variance of RIT is what? Variance of these three, alpha I plus beta I RMT plus epsilon IT. Now we know the definition of variance. Variance of x is expected value of x minus expected value of x whole square. Okay, so E of x minus EX whole square. So it is alpha I plus beta I RMT plus epsilon IT minus expected value of this whole square. Now we know the expected value of alpha I plus beta I RMT plus epsilon IT, it is alpha I plus beta I expected value of RMT. And then if I do some manipulation and square this all terms, I get this. And then I apply the property of expectation, right? Then I apply the property of expectation and variance. So ultimately you can do this. I think it is very simple. You have to apply the property of the variance operator that you have studied in your probability and statistics. Okay. So variance of RIT, what you get, which is a sigma I square, let I indicate by sigma I square, which is a risk of this property, this security I, is equal to beta I square sigma m square. You get this term, expected value of beta I square into RMT minus mu m. This is actually expected value of the or return from the market whole square. So this term gives you sigma m square. This term gives you sigma m square. You can see expected value of Rm minus is average whole square. So that is sigma m square. This expected value of sigma IT square is a sigma epsilon I square, right? And the last term, which is a covariance, which will be 0, right? Last term will be covariance, which will be 0, right? So you get these two terms only. Okay. So last term is a covariance RMT and epsilon IT, which is 0, right? So you can see this property. Covariance between epsilon IT and RMT is 0. So you can use here the equation of covariance. So remember, the equation of expectation means mean value variance and the covariance, which always be there. So sigma I square is again having two components, beta I square, sigma m square plus epsilon I whole square. You can see in expected return we have only two components, but here we have again two components, but it involves this term epsilon I square, unsystematic risk. It is the variance of my random error, which is this random variation of the return on security I, right, compared to the market return. So it depends on this, and this is a constant. We have assumed this is to be constant. And now this term is very important, systematic. We cannot do anything with this. This will be always there. You cannot model this by anything, right? You can assume it. This, you can say sigma m square, you can find on the past data, from the past data. And beta I square, you can see sigma I square is directly proportional to beta I square sigma m square. Now sigma m square is common for all security in market, because sigma m square is a market variance. So that is common to all security. So you can see the risk of individual security is directly related to its beta. So beta emerges as a very important index, and it is called diversifiable risk. And last lecture I told you to look at the beta of different stocks. Okay. Now if I go further in the analysis and I find covariance of the return of security I and security J, then covariance of RIT comma RJT, then it is expected value of RIT minus its mean value into RJT minus its mean value. I have used the definition of covariance. Then further I substitute RIT, RJT and its expected value by using this linear model, and then again apply the property of the expectation. I will come to this equation. Okay, so that analysis, statistical analysis, I leave to you, right? It is morely expectation is a linear operator, so you can use its property. So that will be beta I beta j into expected value of RMT minus ERMT whole square. Now RMT minus ERMT whole square is a sigma m square, right? This is the market variance. This is the market variance. So you can see the covariance between two security is again depending on their beta of both. The sigma m square is a common for all the securities. So beta is a very important parameter, right? The total risk of any security as well as the covariance between two security which are part of the market depends on its beta. And I hope all of you have gone through this beta on the website, right? Because of the time limitation, I want to complete it. I am not discussing this beta much more, but in some time we will discuss it when we do the practical. Now, how to get this parameter from historical data? So we are using the ordinary least square regression from the past data to estimate these parameters like alpha I, beta I and sigma I square, right? So we always estimate these parameters alpha I, beta I. This is beta I cap, estimated value of beta I, alpha I cap, which is the estimated value of alpha I, and sigma epsilon I square cap, which is the estimated value of the epsilon I square. So we have capital T number of sample. So as much as data you get from the past history of the any stock, you can take it, and based on this we find this estimated value of beta I, alpha I and epsilon I square, right? And that equations are written here. We are not going to derive it. It is derived using ordinary least square regression, and we are not expecting to remember it. We use this equation in the practical, right? So if we have the past data in Excel sheet, we can take it in MATLAB, and based on this equation we can calculate or we can estimate this parameter beta I, alpha I and sigma epsilon I square, and then later on we can use this in our model, right, to predict the future. I hope you get this idea, right? So I am not expecting this you to remember. These are the estimated parameters, okay, based on the past data. We will use this technique now onwards from the next week in the practicals when we go for portfolio optimization or security analysis. So I hope you are clear to all. Then last topic is portfolio performance evaluation. So if you have created your portfolio and you say other person also created portfolio using this mean variance portfolio theory. So you analyze the securities and created the portfolio. Somebody has created portfolio of 10 security, another person created portfolio of 15 security, and there is a market portfolio always there, right? Sensex, which is 30 security portfolio, and Nifty, which is a 50 security portfolio in proportion to their market cap. We can say this is one kind of portfolio, okay? And then you have the return from market data available, the risk of the market, all things are available based on the past data, okay? Now you want to compare the different portfolio. Which portfolio is better? Okay, and this is also the portfolio managers are uh, promoting these terms in their advertisement. My portfolio evaluation is this, my portfolio parameter is this. So what are the parameters? So there are three parameters mainly used in the financial world, and they are proposed by Jack Tranior, William Sarpe, and Michael Jensen. So these are very old research, but still it is used in the current financial world, and in fact it is also used in some other domain also. So they are called portfolio performance measurement parameters, and they consider both risk and return simultaneously. And also at the same time they allow the desirability of the candidate portfolio to be ranked, and based on this you can rank the portfolio. Now you cannot use only single measure, but you have to look at all the three measures, because all three measures are slightly differ in different parameters. Let we see. We are not going to derive anything, we accept the result. First one is the Sharpe's reward to variability ratio. So it is denoted by SP, and it is a ratio. So it is ratio of what? Reward to variability. Means reward means excess return. What return you are getting in your portfolio compared to the risk-free return. So it is excess return or risk premium divided by total risk you are taking. So it is return to risk ratio. You can also say excess return to risk ratio or reward to variability ratio. So that is your reward. So what it is? RP bar minus RF divided by sigma p. What is RP by bar? Average return of your portfolio. So you have started creating portfolio and then you calculate the average return over a period, right? And whatever RP bar you get, risk-free return is always there. Last week we have discussed, it is from GSEC, and sigma p, the risk of your portfolio you can calculate, right? These parameters you can calculate, depends on your portfolio construction. And if you find RP bar minus RF divided by sigma p, this RP bar you can also substitute with E of RP, expected value of the return from portfolio. So either RP bar or E of RP minus RF by sigma p. So it involves the return as well as risk. If this parameter is high, that means your risk is low and return is higher. Okay. So higher Sharpe's ratio indicate better security in the mean variance sense. So if somebody says that my Sharpe's ratio is higher, okay, obviously it gives you higher reward with the given risk. Then Trenor's ratio. So Trenor's ratio is also called reward to risk ratio. So this was reward to variability or reward to risk also you can say. Here also it is basically reward to risk ratio. One of the same thing, but the numerator is same, RP bar minus RF means excess return, but denominator instead of sigma p, here we have taken a portfolio's beta. Like security has beta, you can also find portfolio's beta. Okay. So that is beta of P. So depends on the individual security in your, you know the beta of individual security, and you can find the beta of your overall portfolio by considering weights of the security and the beta of individual security. You can find the beta of portfolio, because W1 beta 1 plus W2 beta 2 plus dash 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 W and beta n, that is your beta P. So you can find portfolio's beta. So it considers the beta. Now you recall what beta involve. Beta is involving two things. If you go to our previous discussion of beta, you can see, I want to bring to you this slide. What beta is actually? Yes, beta of security I is this, sigma IM divided by sigma M square. So it is a covariance of your security with the market divided by the market risk. Okay. So this market risk is there for all the security. So it is depending on the how your security is risky compared to market, that is indicated by beta. That is indicated by beta. It is not consider only sigma p, but it consider your relative risk. It consider your relative risk. So remember this difference. It consider the relative risk. Relative risk means risk compared to market. So this consider your risk of the portfolio, but this consider beta parameter of portfolio means it take into consideration the relative risk. Okay. Again, if this is better, if this is higher, with this Trenor's ratio, then the portfolio performance is better because the return is higher and risk is lower, because beta is ultimately specifying the risk. Okay. So you can say the higher value of this means low beta portfolio gives you higher Trenor's ratio, and that's why it will be better, right? So that means Trenor's ratio of given security is greater than that of market, then the security is performing better than it according to CAPM, but it is a relative. Always it should be measured with respect to market, because this beta p is finding the betas of all security, which is always related to market, while this Trenor's Sharpe's ratio not have any term which is related to the market risk or return. Okay, so that is the difference. Then the third measure is called the Jensen's measure or Jensen's alpha. Sometimes it is called Jensen's alpha. And this Jensen has rearranged this CAPM formula by framing its own parameter called alpha p, alpha of portfolio, or Jensen's alpha of portfolio. It is equal to Rp bar minus this equation of CAPM. You can see Rf plus Rm bar minus Rf into beta p. So again, it consider the beta of portfolio. It also considers the return of the market. It also considers the return of the market. So how much excess your portfolio provides a return compared to this CAPM? That is what alpha p is. That is what alpha p is. Again, if alpha p is higher, it is better. So this alpha p involves the market return as well as beta of the portfolio, and this whole term is negated, right? This whole term is negated from this Rp bar. So your average portfolio return minus this CAPM formula, right? Considering your beta of portfolio. Okay, this Rf Rm bar is there. It is applicable to all securities, right? All portfolios. It is same. Rf Rm bar are constant. Only beta p will vary and Rp bar will vary. So depends on these two parameters. If you get higher alpha p, obviously your performance is better, right? And this measures the desirability of portfolio P, means how much your portfolio is desirable in CAPM sense, right? That's why if alpha p greater than 0, the security performing better, right? If alpha p less than 0 means you are getting, your portfolio is giving return less than the CAPM model, right? So its security is performing worse, because here there is a chance it will come to negative, because there is no denominator here. It is not a ratio, it is difference. Remember the earlier two parameters Sharpe and Trenor's are ratio. This Jensen's measure is a difference term, so it may be positive or negative. However, this is not involving any denominator, means ratio term. So this Jensen's alpha has one drawback. It does not give indication of actual risk level of the security. Again, if you compare this Jensen with the Tranor or with Sharpe, so good Jensen or bad Jensen, it implies or double implies that good or bad Tranor's ratio, because here beta p is in the denominator, while here is this beta p is come in the overall subtraction factor compared to this Rp. So good Jensen means good Tranor, bad Jensen means bad Tranor, and vice versa is also true. If we compare Sharpe and Tranor, then good Sharpe, if good Sharpe ratio means higher return, lower portfolio risk, right? That means good Tranor, because beta p is depending on the sigma p, right? But if you have a good Tranor, right? If you have a good Tranor, that means your beta p is lower, but beta p is involving a relative term with respect to market. Suppose market itself is having higher risk, then your beta also you can say may be equal to 1 or maybe less than 1. So good Tranor ratio can happen even with the bad Sharpe's ratio, because Sharpe involves your absolute risk, right? Absolute risk, while this involves the relative risk. So remember this difference. Similarly, bad Tranor ratio. If you have a bad Tranor ratio, that means bad Sharpe's ratio, obviously, but bad Sharpe's ratio can occur with the good Tranor's ratio. So remember, the Sharpe and Tranor are related, but they are not exactly the, you can say, a same proportion, while the Jensen's and Tranor are giving ultimately the same kind of indication. So I hope these three parameters are clear to you, and later on we will use it in the MATLAB. We have function for this Jensen, Tranor's and Sharpe's ratio, and we calculate this based on the past data given to us and the portfolio created in the MATLAB, right? We create some virtual portfolio and then we find what is this ratio for different portfolios. So I hope this goal is clear to you, and this is the end of unit 1 in theory. Now I go to MATLAB, and before I go to MATLAB, I take a pause of 1 minute, and if you have any doubt so far, you can tell me on the chat box, because your sound is not audible. I have to report this issue to IT team. So far, let I So any doubt in Unit 1 theory, float on chat box. I take some break and then we go to the MATLAB session. So just wait for 1 or 2 minutes. And as I discussed earlier, in our internal assessment 1, we have a syllabus of the Unit 1. Yeah, I want to know what I told you previously. If anybody has gone through the website of NSE, BSE or Money Control, which I told you last lecture, and if you find beta of some stocks, then they can float the values. So it is better you go to the practical data because this subject is basically related to financial data analytics. So you need to deal with the data. It is better you go to the current data because the theoretical discussion only be fruitful if you relate it with the practical things. HDFC 11%, RIL 10%. No, this percentage value it is should be within 0 and 1 range. I don't think this is the correct value. No, this is not a correct value. Let I check it. Let I check it for RIL, which is Reliance Industries. Its beta is right now 0.91 RIL. You can check Money Control. So see, it is varying with market, but its beta is lower than 1. I give you example of some high beta stocks also. You can check it on Money Control. What is at present? Let me take some naughty stocks. So if you search because right now the market itself is fluctuating, so it is very uh, difficult to find the high beta stocks because compared to market, the stocks are moving in proportion. Anyway, you can do your search and find some securities which are having beta greater than 1 at present. Okay.
Sir, Bajaj Finance, Bajaj Finserv.
Yeah. So yeah, sure. You can find it is Adani and Trias. These are the naughty stocks which are having 1.29 risky, right? More risky. So such beta you can find and compare their movement. You can compare their movements, right? And you can see how they are correlated with market. Later on, we will do this analysis in MATLAB. If time permits, whatever we can do, we will do. Okay. Now let me go to the MATLAB session. I open my online MATLAB. Alright, so I have so many things open. Let's reopen this new file. Okay, if I have not created this file, then I will make it new. Okay, there are so many files. Let me create a new file. Okay, anyway, we have a fresh session now. So what we expect in the practical, but before I go to this session, I assume you have completed your experiment number 1C, D and E. 1C and 1D, very simple data given in the Excel sheet. You have to find the annual rate of return in experiment 1C for the given annuity plan, and in experiment 1D you have to create the structure, or you have to create one database for the loan amount given, right, and the interest given, right. So you have to create a structure of the principal paid, interest paid and balance amount at end of the each period, and EMI value you have to calculate. So there are internal functions available, inbuilt function available, that you can run in the MATLAB by reading the data from Excel and then write back the data into the Excel file, and that's how you can create a complete data structure, right. So I hope you have done this. Experiment 1E, I have given a little bit of more practicality. So you have to deal with the real-time data from the NSE website for the bond from the HUDCO, and particularly I have given the HUDCO provides so many number of bonds. I have given you this ISIN number of this bond with series N4, and from that bond you have to find its issue date, maturity date, coupon rate, face value, coupon payment frequency, and load it in Excel file with proper label. Then suppose you are assuming that purchasing it in on 1st January 2015, so you have to find its historical price on that date, and you have to assume you have purchased this, right, on this date, and then you have to find the yield to maturity and cash flow dates, and by running the analytics using the function like bond price or bond yield, right. So this kind of functions, and CF dates, there are three functions which are useful. CF dates, right, this function, that bond yield that we have seen last time. So I go to that particular function, yes, yield function. So we have seen this yield function, bond yield, you can see this function, right. So this bond yield function and the cash flow dates provides you the bond yield as well as the cash flow date, and you have to write that result back into the Excel file, means on which date what amount I will get, how many cash flows will be there, right, in this particular bond if I purchase it on this date up to the date of maturity. Okay, so that provides you a complete structure, right, complete cash flow structure. So I hope you have done it, and if any difficulty you can tell me, or if you have not done, you tell me. I have only one option to float my solution, and then you have to refer to that solution, right. I have intentionally not floated the solution. I want you to do something yourself on practical data. Now today also we take some hypothetical data, but you can do this analysis on practical data in this experiment 1F, and where we have now the example of the again financial data analytics. This is the last example in this financial data analytics related to the fixed security. Now next time we will go with the risky security, right, with the portfolio analysis and security analysis. So in this experiment I illustrate the bond price and yield curve. Okay, we have seen this in the theory class. There are yield curves of the bond which are very important. So let me take some hypothetical data. You can take a real data by going to any website of NSE by taking any particular bond of any company. So let I have say bond number 1, 2, 3, 4, and I have the settlement date of same for all this. Let I assume this bond started from this date. These bonds are issued from this date, 15 January 1995. All four bonds are issued, right. So that's for simplicity. Then each having different maturities. So some matured in 2020, some in 2025, some matured 19, right, in different months, different dates. So these are the random dates I have taken, just hypothetical. Let I assume the face value of all bonds are same. So at maturity, their values, all their values are 1000 rupees. Okay, those their face values are same. Let I take some are coupon bonds, some are zero coupon bonds. So say bond 1 and bond 3 are zero coupon bond, means they are not paying any coupon, right. And the coupon rate for bond 2 and bond 4 are slightly different, say 0.05 and let's say 0.055. You can convert in percentage by multiplying it by 100. I have written in an absolute value. Then let we take a coupon period per year. So how many coupons they are paying per year? Say 0 coupon bond not paying any coupon per year, so 0 0. And let I say these two bonds are paying the coupon half yearly, means they are paying coupon twice in a year. And I also know the yield to maturity. This is the yield to maturity on this date that I know, right? I have calculated the yield to maturity. If I purchase this bond with this particular features on this date, with this maturity, this face value, this coupon rate and number of coupons, I get this yield. This data is available to me, and all these 4 bonds have slightly different yields. Let me take this. Now I want to evaluate on starting with the 15 January 1995 up to 15 January 2018, and I want to evaluate yearly the bond yield curve. I want to find yearly, means on 15 January 95, 15 January 96, 15 January 97 up to 15 January 2018. I want to find the yield curve if my yield changes plus or minus 0.05 in step of say 0.005. This step size is only for our MATLAB, because MATLAB is a discrete software, so we have to provide a step size. Okay, so this is just a resolution for our clarity. Otherwise, in real practice, we can have only this yield fluctuation available because of the market situation. Let we assume there is a yield fluctuation of plus or minus 0.05. Okay, you can multiply it by 100, it is 0.5%, right? So from this yield, if this yield will fluctuate either on plus side or minus side, then how the bond price will change? How the bond price will change on each date? 1995 January 15, 96, 97 likewise. So I have to generate such 24 total plots for all the 4 bonds, right? So one plot on 95 January 15, 15 January 95, similarly up to 15 January 2018. I have 24 years. So for each year on this date, I have to generate the bond yield curve if my yield is fluctuating with this, right? So how my bond price is changing. Okay, so that's what my aim is. So I hope you got the aim of this experiment. And this is required to study the bond yield curve. So I have written some text so that also you can read. And we are using the inbuilt function of our financial toolbox to do this analytics. And this function we have seen bond price. So earlier last lecture I introduced that function, right? So you go to this, this is the pricing function, okay, bond price, B&D price. So we use this bond price function. It requires all this data: settlement date, maturity date, issue date, right, yield, all these things are required. So if you want to calculate bond price, you can use this, or if you want to calculate the yield, you can use the bond yield function that we have used last time. Okay, so in last experiment we have already used the bond yield. Now we use this function bond price, right? But I want to evaluate at different date, but for 4 bonds. So I have to provide all this data in vectors. So yield of the or all 4 bond, coupon rate of all 4 bond, settlement date of all 4 bond, maturity of all 4 bond. If I don't know some parameters which are non-compulsory or not mandatory, I can float it by the null vector, right? So that's we have seen last time in this function bond price. Okay, and what it will return? It returns 2 things: the price of the bond and accrued interest. Yeah, I have told you to study this accrued interest term. Anybody studied this term? I have written its explanation here in the Word file. Later on you can go through it, but I want to know from you what is accrued interest. I have explained here with some example. Anybody can tell me what is accrued interest in the bond? These are very practical terms. Now accrued interest is what? Let me understand in a short. It is the amount of interest earned on a debt like bond, but yet not collected. Suppose, let me take an example. Assume that there is a fixed coupon bond, right? And that paid semi-annually on June 1 and December 1 the coupon, right? Means interest it is paying half yearly on 1st June, 1st December every year. Suppose I am holding some bond, but I sell it on October 1. So I have got the interest last interest in June 1, but next expected coupon is in December 1. So if I sell in between, what about my interest from June 1 to October 1? What about that period? I will get it? No. That interest will be given to the buyer of this bond on October 1, because this buyer may hold the bond on December 1. If I assume the buyer of that bond from me is holding that particular bond until this December 1, so he will get the interest for this whole period, June 1 to December 1. But I have hold in between June 1 to October 1. So what will be about my interest? I will not get interest on October 1. So that part, accrued interest from June 1 to October 1, depends on its coupon rate, is already there in the actual bond price, which is called the dirty price. So in market, the bond price is not the clean price, it is dirty price. So it includes the accrued interest. So it is actual bond price, depends on its coupon rate and the face value, and whatever accrued interest based on its coupon rate, okay, or based on the period at which the bond is bought or sold. So that is called dirty price. So we need to know the two things, the actual bond price, the clean price, and the accrued interest. And if I add these two terms, I get the present bond price. So if I am selling this price, I will get a little bit higher price because this accrued interest is included in the actual bond price in the market. So when you sell this, you get the accrued interest, and the buyer will have to pay this extra because later on, when he get the interest at the next coupon date, he get the interest for the full period. So this extra thing he has paid will be recovered when he get the next coupon. So I assume this thing is clear. So I have to find this clean price and accrued price, and from that I calculate the dirty price, which is the actual price. Okay, so I use this in my analytics. So based on the given data, let I frame some data structure. So you might have this in a table form, or it might be an Excel file. So if it is an Excel file, you have to read it, and from the table you have to find the data in some variable. Otherwise, you can directly create some vectors in the MATLAB. So let I create the settlement date is common for all. So let I say settle is 15 January 1995. I created a string in a format. You can see DD triple M YYYY. So this is one format, right, in a date string. So that I have used. Then maturity. There are 4 different maturities. So let I create that vector using this same format. You keep all the dates in the same format throughout the program, right? So it is in the same format, and let I find their number because I have to deal with now numbers because maturity dates are different. So let I apply the date number function. Now hopefully you recall what is date number function. It calculates the number assigned to each date based on some reference that we have seen in the very first lab. Okay. Then I create one vector of face value, say 1000, 1000, 1000, coupon rate vector, period means number of periods per year for coupon payment, and yield vector. Okay, so whatever given in data in table, I have created the vectors. Okay. Then I use the financial toolbox to run the analytics, and I run this bond price function by providing the inputs in the order in which it requires. The first input is yields. Then this triple line indicates that the data is in, or the text is in the next line. So that is here coupon rate. You can refer to the help of this function bond price. First parameter is yield. So that is provided for all the 4 bonds. It is vector, coupon rate, settlement. Settle is common for all. You can also create a vector of the 15 January 1995 same. Otherwise scalar is sufficient. Then maturity, which is there in the terms of date numbers, periods. Then other parameters are optional, which are not known. So I keep it blank, or you can say null vector. You can refer to the help of this BND price for entering all the parameters to run the data analytics. Okay. And last is face value. So some parameters are compulsory like this. These parameters are compulsory, which I have entered. Other parameters are optional. If available, I can enter. If not available, I cannot. Then face value is available, so I'm entering. And then it returns 2 things, the clean price and accrued interest. So I calculate the price of all the bonds equal to clean price plus accrued interest. Okay. So this returns 4 different prices for 4 bonds, right, on this particular date, 15 January 1995. So if my maturity is this and face value of all bond is this is coupon rate, this is period, this is yield, then what will be the bond price of these 4 bonds I get in this vector? Let me copy paste this in MATLAB and run it. So I hope you understood this. If not, don't worry, read this carefully and be practice and understand. The test will be open book or open MATLAB, so you need not to remember anything. That's the biggest advantage, but understanding is very important. Let me run it by saving this file. What we say, CBFSA experiment 1F. Okay. Yeah, so it's run. Okay, so there is no mistake. Let me find these prices. And you can see all 4 bonds have different price. Even though their face value are 1000, you can see the huge difference. You can see the huge difference, right? This is the bond price, huge difference. First bond is bought, you can buy with this value, second is with this, third with this, fourth with this, right? It's because some are coupon paying bonds, some are non-coupon paying bonds. So you can see the coupon paying bonds are having higher values because in between you will get something, while the non-coupon paying bonds are here having the lower value because all things will get accumulated and finally you get 1000 rupees at maturity. So I hope you understand this difference, right? Then what is my next task? Now I have to apply the change in yield. This was with the fixed yield. So earlier I have run this analytics with the fixed yield. If my yield is not changed, means yield to maturity remains same. Okay. Then what will be the bond price that I have calculated? Okay. This I have calculated. Now my yield is changing from this base value. This is the base value. And there is a fluctuation of minus 0.05 to plus 0.05. And the step size is 0.005. So let I take one vector dy, yield changes minus 0.05 to plus 0.05 in step of 0.005. Okay. Now I convert this settlement date also into date vector because I have to regress or I have to find the data on 15 January 1995 up to 15 January 2018. So let I convert this settlement date, which is my initial date, into date vector. So I segregate into year, month and date. Okay, that's it. Then I create one date vector or time vector dt, which is date number of this d1, which is the year of my settlement date, which is 1995, and I have to find this year from 1995 means d1 up to 2018 because I have to find this curve, yield curve up to 2018, 15 January 18. The date and month remains same. So D2 is your month from this date vector, which is same for all, and D3 will remain same. So it is 15 January 1995, 1996 up to 2018. That is in this vector dt. So that will evaluation date. Now this vectors dy, dt as well as number of bonds. I have 4 number of bonds, so I create number of times, means how many times, how many evaluation I have to do, time steps. So length of dt I am finding in some variable. The number of yields, how many yields I am considering. So that depends on the size or length of this vector, and number of bonds. So that depends on length of maturity. It is 4 actually. You can write directly the 4, but length of maturity, you can see there are 4 different bonds. So that is actually length of this maturity vector. So there are number of bonds. Then I pre-locate some vector prices for all bonds and with all yields. There are different number of yields, right, that I have calculated in this particular variable, number of yields. So I initialize all the prices to zeros, which is huge array considering number of yields, right. If my yield fluctuate from my base value from with some minus and some plus tolerance, and for number of bonds means bond number 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And for plotting, I use 4 different color. Say for bond 1, I will use red color, green color for bond 2, blue color for bond 3, and yellow color for bond 4. So let I have one vector color equal to this RGBY. Later on, I will use it in figure. Okay. Now I run this for loop for I equal to 1 to number of bonds, means for each bond I am running this loop. For j equal to 1 number of times, means on each date, January 15 January 1995, 15 January 96, 15 January 97, likewise. Okay, so I am running for bond 1 15 January 95, 96, 97, likewise then bond 2. Okay, and I am calculating now clean price accrued interest using the bond price function. If my yield is not a constant, so it is yield of I, means yield of bond 1 plus dy. If my yield of bond 1 is varying from this coupon rate of I, considering coupon rate of bond 1, and dtj, considering it is evaluated on this date. Okay, maturity remains same, other things remain same, but only for bond I, means it is bond 1 initially, then for bond 2 and later on. And then I find this prices of bond I first, because my I is 1, so it is for bond 1. So prices all, means all yields, I will calculate clean price plus accrued interest and sketch it in some figure, and I plot dy versus price, means change in yield versus price for bond 1, and let I assign color I. The third parameter is color I. So for bond 1 it is R, for bond 2 it will be green, and so on. Okay, assign the X label, Y label, title, hold on. This hold on function will hold on the figure in the same plot. So next time when the for loop run, it will be sketch the figure in the same plot, because I get the plot of 4 bonds in the same figure, and such 24 figures will be generated. Okay, and then we end the for loop. So you can understand this for loop, because now you are champion in the programming, because you have studied so many things, C, Python, Java, and what not. So I hope this MATLAB is easiest of all. Let me copy paste this in my MATLAB. So let I do this, Control C and copy paste it. Earlier we have taken a fixed yield, now we are taking the change in yield. So I have up to this, copy pasted. Now I copy paste this also. All right, let I assume it is completely pasted. Now run it. Wait, it will take a time, because it will generate 24 figures. I don't know how in online version it will able to generate all this figure, but in offline version it can generate quickly. Yeah, so all the 24 figures are generated. Let me look them one by one. Be patient, because we are running on cloud. Yeah, so say this is figure 1 for the 4 bonds. It is evaluated on why this is invisible, I don't know. Just wait. Yeah, it is evaluated on this date, 15 January 1995, right? And this is the change in yield minus 0.05 to 0.05, and how the bond price is fluctuating for all these 4 bonds. So suppose your yield is your base rate that we have seen, you will get at this price. These 4 bonds you get at this price. If you can see, the red belongs to bond 1. So at 0 you get this bond 1 at this price, which is 145 rupees. Bond 2, which is green, so you get at 594 rupees. But my yield is changing from this fixed value either on minus or plus side. You can see there is a huge fluctuation here. There is a huge fluctuation in price, right? If yield turn to be negative, you have to pay here the high price, right? And likewise. So this way, this is for 1995. Now let we see how it is changing with respect to date 1996. Almost same, slightly shifted downward. Figure 3, almost the same. These two curves are slightly merging, almost parallel curves are there, slightly shifting. Figure 4, you can see this has slightly shifted. Figure 5, again there is a slight shift. How, see, the evaluation date is changing now to 1999, then 2000. Figure 7, again there is a parallel shift, 2008, 2009, sorry, it is 2003, then 2004, 5, 6, there is a parallel shift, 7, 8, 9, Now you can see the curves are, these two curves are becoming parallel, but these two are slightly trying to cross. These two are slightly trying to cross.
Hello.
So I will go up to figure 24. And let me see, last is figure 24. Now these two have crossed. You can see how this yield is changing on the last date of evaluation. So you can compare this bond yield curves, and I think time limit is over. So I'm not taking much more time, but that's complete our experiment. So let me end this session. You will do enough practice. Let I stop recording.